You think you want to know what is going to happen tomorrow, but I am telling you right now, you really don't. Imagine waking up every single morning knowing exactly which neighbor is going to get into a car accident, which friend is going to lose their job, and exactly what time the rain is going to start hitting your window. At first, it sounds like a superpower, right? You could win the lottery, skip the traffic, and never be surprised by a bad day again. But for the woman we are talking about today, this gift was actually a slow-motion nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. In this video, we are going inside the mind of a woman who saw the world through a different lens than the rest of us. We are going to look at how she discovered this strange power, the moment she realized she couldn't stop the bad things from happening, and the terrifying prediction that changed everything for her and the world around her. By the time we get to the end of this story, you are going to be very glad that you have no idea what is coming next in your life. We are going to see if the future is actually set in stone, or if there is a way to glitch the system and change our fate. Let's start with who she was. Before the visions, before the fame, and before the fear, Eleanor was just a regular person. She worked a normal job, liked her coffee a specific way, and worried about normal things like bills and what to cook for dinner. She lived in a quiet town where nothing ever really happened. Her life was predictable, but in a boring way, not a psychic way. She wasn't someone who believed in ghosts or magic. She was a practical woman who believed in what she could see and touch. Then, the catalyst happened. It wasn't a lightning strike or a near-death experience. It was something small. She was sitting at her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, and she had this sudden, overwhelming feeling that her glass of water was going to fall. But it wasn't just a feeling. She saw it happen in her mind. She saw the glass wobble, the water splash across the wood, and a specific shard of glass landing right next to her toe. 3 seconds later, the table vibrated because a heavy truck drove by outside. The glass wobbled. It fell. The water splashed. And that tiny shard of glass landed exactly where she saw it. At first, she laughed it off. Coincidence, right? We've all had those moments where we think of someone, and then they call us. But then it happened again, and again. She would be at the grocery store and know exactly which light bulb was about to flicker out. She would be talking to her sister and know the phone was going to ring before the first beep. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just getting better at noticing patterns. Maybe she was just hyper-aware of her surroundings. But deep down, a cold feeling was starting to grow in her stomach. This wasn't just guessing. She was seeing time before it arrived. The validation of her gift came about a week later. This was the moment she couldn't lie to herself anymore. She saw a vision of a local bakery catching fire. She saw the oven malfunctioning, the black smoke pouring out the front door, and the specific time on the clock for 12 p.m. She spent the whole day pacing her living room, telling herself she was crazy. But at 4:15 p.m., she heard the sirens. She drove down to the town square, and there it was. The black smoke, the melted sign, and the fire chief shaking his head. That was the day Eleanor realized her ordinary life was over. Now, you might think this is where she becomes a superhero, but the reality was much darker. Seeing the future isn't like watching a movie. For Eleanor, it was a physical assault on her senses. When a vision came, it wasn't a clear TV screen. It was a rush of smells, sounds, and physical pain. Sometimes she would smell burning rubber before a car crash vision. Other times, her head would throb so hard she couldn't stand up. It was like her brain was trying to process data that it wasn't built to handle. Then there was the Cassandra complex. If you don't know that term, it comes from Greek mythology. Cassandra was a woman who could see the future, but was cursed so that no one would ever believe her. That was Eleanor's life. Imagine trying to tell your best friend, "Hey, don't go on that date tonight, because you're going to get food poisoning and end up in the hospital." Your friend isn't going to thank you. They're going to think you're weird, or jealous, or losing your mind. Her relationships started to crumble. How do you have a normal conversation with your husband when you already know he's going to complain about his boss in 5 minutes? The spontaneity of life was gone. She felt like she was living in a replay of a game she had already watched. She became distant. She stopped going to parties because the noise of everyone's futures was too loud in her head. She could look at a room full of happy people and see the divorces, the illnesses, and the sad endings that were coming for them years down the line. It was an emotional weight that no human is designed to carry. The physical toll was just as bad. She stopped sleeping because the visions were even more vivid in her dreams. She lost weight. Her skin became pale. She looked like someone who was being haunted, and in a way, she was. She was being haunted by things that hadn't even happened yet. She started to ask herself, why me? Is there a reason I'm seeing this? Am I supposed to save people, or am I just a witness to the inevitable? Eleanor couldn't stay quiet forever. The burden was too much to carry alone. The breakthrough happened when she predicted a major bridge collapse in a neighboring city. She didn't just say it would happen. She drew a picture of the specific crack in the support beam and sent it to the local news and the police. They ignored her, of course. They thought she was just another crazy person looking for attention. But when the bridge actually fell, and her letter was found with the exact date and the exact cause, the world changed its tune. Suddenly, she wasn't just a weird lady in a small town. She was a national sensation. The media descended on her house like a swarm of locusts. Everyone wanted a piece of her. News anchors wanted her to predict the stock market. Scientists wanted to put wires on her head to see how her brain worked. She went from being isolated and alone to being the most famous person on the planet for a few weeks. But with fame comes the skeptics. There were a lot of people who wanted to prove she was a fraud. They called her a cold reader or said she was just making lucky guesses based on logic. A group of researchers from a famous university brought her into a controlled lab. They put her in a room with no windows and asked her to tell them what was happening in the room next door. They tried to trick her. They tried to debunk her. But time after time, she got it right. She could tell them the color of the shirt the person in the next room was wearing or what word they were about to write on a chalkboard. The scientists were baffled. They couldn't find a logical explanation. Her brain didn't look different on the scans, but her results were impossible. This led to a massive rise in her following. People started treating her like a prophet. They would wait outside her house for hours just to ask her if their sick relatives would get better or if they should marry their partners. But then, the dark side of fame showed up. Big corporations and powerful politicians started calling. They didn't want to help people. They wanted to use her to win elections and make billions of dollars. They offered her everything: money, protection, luxury, if she would just work for them. Can we change what is coming? This is where Eleanor hit a massive ethical wall. She started to wonder about the nature of time itself. If she saw a vision of someone falling down the stairs, and she warned them, and then they didn't fall, did she change the future? Or was her warning always part of the timeline? This is the big question that philosophers have argued about for centuries: determinism versus free will. She decided to run an experiment. She had a vision that a small flower pot on her porch would be knocked over by a stray cat at 2 p.m. the next day. To prevent this, she took the flower pot and put it inside her house, in the middle of the kitchen table, where no cat could get to it. She felt proud of herself. She thought she had beaten the future. But at 2 p.m., she tripped over her own rug, bumped into the table, and knocked the flower pot onto the floor, where it smashed into pieces. She realized, with a sense of horror, that her attempt to change the future was the very thing that caused the outcome she was trying to avoid. This is what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more she tried to fight the visions, the more she felt like a puppet on a string. It made her wonder if we have any choice at all. Are we all just following a script that was written before we were born? This created a massive internal struggle for her. If she saw a vision of someone getting a terminal illness, should she tell them? If the future is fixed, telling them just gives them years of extra suffering and anxiety. But if it's not fixed, her silence might be a death sentence. She started keeping her mouth shut again, but for a different reason this time. She was terrified that by trying to help, she would actually make things worse. She was looking for a glitch, a moment where she could truly change a negative outcome without triggering a different disaster. Then came the great prediction. This wasn't about a broken flower pot or a local fire. This was a vision that felt different from all the others. It was bigger, louder, and more terrifying. She saw a massive natural disaster, a giant earthquake and tsunami that would hit a heavily populated coastline. She saw the dates, the locations, and the sheer scale of the destruction. Thousands of lives were at stake. She didn't hesitate this time. She knew she had to try, even if she had failed before. She used her fame and her connections to get a meeting with the highest levels of government. She showed them her past records, her scientific validations, and the terrifying details of the coming disaster. But this time, she ran into a new kind of wall: greed. There was a group of powerful people who stood to lose a lot of money if the area she mentioned was evacuated. They had invested billions in real estate and tourism in that specific location. If she caused a panic, their stocks would crash. They didn't care if she was right. They cared about their bank accounts. They used their influence to discredit her. They paid 4 experts to go on TV and say her powers were fading or that she had gone crazy from the pressure. Eleanor was silenced. Her social media accounts were shadow banned. The news stopped taking her calls, and she was even placed under a psychiatric hold for a few days to keep her out of the public eye. She was trapped in a room, watching the clock tick closer to the date she had seen in her mind. She felt completely isolated. She had the gift of knowing the future, but she was powerless to stop it. She was like a passenger on a train watching the tracks end, but she wasn't the driver. The day arrived. Eleanor sat in her room, staring at the television. For hours, nothing happened. The sun was shining on that coastline. People were playing on the beach, and the world seemed perfectly normal. The skeptics were already writing their victory articles, mocking her for being wrong. She almost started to hope she was crazy. She wanted to be wrong more than anything in the world. But then, the ground began to shake. The earthquake was exactly as she had seen it. The tsunami followed shortly after. The devastation was beyond words. Because there had been no warning, the loss of life was staggering. As the news footage started rolling in, showing the very images Eleanor had described weeks earlier, the world fell silent. The people who had silenced her were suddenly very quiet. The public, however, was furious. They realized that they had been lied to and that a woman had tried to save them, but was stopped by the people in power. In the aftermath, Eleanor wasn't seen as a hero, and she didn't feel like one. She felt like a failure. Even though she was right, the result was the same as if she had been wrong. The world changed that day. People became obsessed with finding other seers. Governments started secret programs to try and find children with similar abilities. It was the beginning of a new era, but for Eleanor, it was the end of her journey. She disappeared from the public eye. Some people say she went to live in a remote cabin where there are no clocks and no news. Others say she found a way to turn off her gift using meditation or some kind of medicine. But the most interesting theory is that she finally found her glitch. The theory goes that in the middle of all that tragedy, she managed to save one single person, someone who wasn't supposed to survive, but did because of a tiny, secret message she sent. So, what can we learn from the woman who knew the future? Her story is a reminder that knowing what is going to happen doesn't necessarily give you power. Real power isn't in the what, it's in the now. Eleanor spent so much of her life in next week, next month, or next year that she forgot how to live in the present. She lost her friends, her health, and her peace of mind because she was always looking past the current moment. The mystery of time is something we might never fully understand. Maybe the future is a straight line, or maybe it's a million different paths that change every time we make a choice. But the lesson Eleanor left behind is simple. The beauty of life is in the surprise. It's in not knowing how the movie ends. It's in the risk, the chance, and the mystery. If we knew everything that was going to happen, we would stop trying. We would stop growing. Think about your own life. Think about the best things that have ever happened to you. Weren't they usually surprises? The person you met by accident, the job offer you didn't expect, the sudden laugh on a bad day. If you had seen those coming, they wouldn't have felt as special. Eleanor's gift was actually a thief that stole the magic of the unknown from her. As we look back at her legacy, we have to ask ourselves, if someone handed you a book that contained every single thing that would happen in your life from now until the end, would you open it? Or would you throw it in the fire and choose to walk into the dark, one step at a time, just like the rest of us? The world will always be looking for the next person who can see the future, but maybe we should be looking for the people who are the best at living in the present. Because at the end of the day, the future is just a destination. The present is where the actual journey happens. Eleanor found that out the hard way, and she would probably tell you that the greatest vision you can have is the one you see when you open your eyes right now. Subscribe to the channel to see more stories about the mysteries of the human mind.